Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name is Ben Grant. His name's JB, and we are here to get you set for Game 3, Week 4, as the Argos look for revenge against the defending Grey Cup champions, the Montreal Alouettes. Before we get into anything, apologies for those watching on YouTube. We have a growing YouTube contingent, not as many as of you that listen through the streaming platforms, but it is getting there. It's building. I'm sorry, we do not have video for you today, so you've just got audio. I'm a bit under the weather, I'm afraid, and just doing my best to make sure that we can get this episode out there. Before we get into our lineup today, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. This is a great place to go pregame. JB and I have been down there a number of times. It's always really cool to talk to our listeners down there. And one thing that they all have in common is they're all really happy to support Something in the Water because they support us, this show, and it's something that they like. But they're always thrilled that the beer is fantastic because they say, we would support you anyway, but isn't it nice that this is excellent beer? And they've got so many great beers to choose from. Longboat Pale Ale is the one to go with if you're not sure, because it's a beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. So you got to check that out. And it, like all their other stuff, is fantastic. So get down to Something in the Water, maybe pregame this Friday with the Alouettes in town. Go right after work, hang out at Something in the Water, and then make your way on over to BMO Field. The lineup today is pretty huge, JB. We've got Landon Rice signing. Darius Sirocco put on the 6-game injured list. We've got a ticket giveaway and pick six, both courtesy of Something in the Water. Plus, we've got our game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, let's get into things, JB. And before we do, a birthday wish to Adam Goss, the PA announcer, the best PA announcer in the league. It is his birthday today as we record here Wednesday. And so happy birthday, Adam. I know everyone in the Argo family would love to wish you a happy birthday. And so happy birthday from us as well. JB, let's get into this Landon Rice signing. This kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. We had talked about them needing to pick up another tackle because tackle seems to be very thin on this team in terms of starting experience. You can't get much better than Landon Rice. He was the number 7 free agent available in the 2024 free agent class, according to 3 Down Nation. He's a Canadian who doesn't just start at tackle. He was one of the best tackles in the league last year, coming off 2 East All-Star nods. And until he got hurt after, I think it was after game 9 last year with a neck injury. He was one of my favorite tackles in the league last year. Didn't quite make it back from that injury. He did back up in the playoffs in the Grey Cup. Never quite got back in the field, but I would certainly be willing to take a flyer on a guy like that. I think that makes me feel a lot more comfortable about the backup tackle position. I assume you're on the same page.
Yeah, it's terrific. I mean, I think it's clearly connected to an injury. So I don't think it was just a luxury, but if he is able to, if he's able to regain even most of his form, that is an amazing addition.
Yeah, and that injury you spoke of, like Darius Sirocco going on the 6th game, and that makes room for Landon Rice to come in. But not just that, like as you know, like football is a physically grueling game, and there were times during the last game where there's so much heavy contact on the line where you're just looking to make sure everyone gets up out of that pile. And near the end of that game, it just looked like a few of those old linemen were doing their best, toughing it out and just trying their best to make it through. And so you're one play away at all times. And I thought there might be a scenario last week near the end of the game. I'm like, man, I hope these 5 guys make it through, because it was a physical contest last week. And so maybe even seeing that too is just that little nudge that the front office needs to say, we got to get another tackle in here, because they've got great depth on the interior. I assume with Sirocco going on the 6th game, that Vandal is probably going to be the backup center now. He was taking center reps in preseason, looked pretty good there. And they've got great depth at guard as well. So this now shores up the tackle position, and that's a position that I really feel comfortable with now. Now onto Sirocco. He's had no luck this year. He got injured in camp, wasn't able to dress. They were holding him out of preseason, trying to see if he could get better. Started the season on the shelf. Remember, like Sirocco is a starter. He was an all-star last year, played excellent football at center, and just couldn't quite get back to 100%. And now being on the sixth game, this isn't a bad move. I think this now gives him time, get back in perfect health. It's a long grind, this 18-game season. And so I'd rather see that than them trying to really push to get him back in there. And if you got the luxury, if you feel Van Dahl is now up to speed and you can put Sirocco in the sixth game, then why not? I think that makes sense. JB, let's get into our pick six for this week. And this is a contest that Something in the Water is running to give a six-pack of beer to a fan with a question. And we had a lot of great pick six submissions this week. And we are going with Chris Murphy, who wrote in and asked, when you refer to the flats, which part of the field are you referring to? And the reason I think this is a great question is because we just came off kind of explaining zone coverage, which was a question we had last week, and more questions arose out of that question. And so we'll keep kind of doing a little bit of football 101 as we go. And these are great questions. And again, don't be embarrassed or uncomfortable if you don't know any of the terms we're using. Please ask. Like, we want you to know. We don't want to be just saying things that are going over people's heads. We try not to. And so if there's a term you don't know, please ask. We may answer it on the spot, or maybe we will pick out your question for Something in the Water's pick six. And just like Chris Murphy, you can win a six-pack of beer. So JB, the flats, parts of the field in general, are weird in football because they're not necessarily all universal. It's not like tennis where there are lines exactly in this spot, and this is where this area is, and this is where this area is. With the flats, to me, it's generally outside the numbers within 10 yards, so shorter area of the field. And usually this is denoted by the defense as being picked up by a specific defender. So a defender will have the flats. And what that means is that they might follow somebody downfield, but ultimately that short area, 10 yards and in, outside the numbers, that's their domain. That's where they've got to make sure nobody's open, nobody's waiting for a pass. But, and perhaps JB, you can explain this too. Like if, in sometimes on defense, you'll see defenders who have flats responsibility drift away from it because there's no threat there. And so they want to make themselves useful.
Yeah. I mean, flats is the other half of cover two and cover three. If cover 2 and 3 are people taking 2 or 3 defenders taking deep zones, then the flip side of that deep zone is a underneath zone. And it's what makes cover 2 and cover 3 often so hard to do, is because it's really hard to cover a zone as opposed to a person. So flats is exactly as you say, that area right by the line of scrimmage out towards the sideline, where they're going to try and do like a dump off pass to a running back, or maybe, a quick out to a receiver to punish teams who are playing a deep zone, to try and get them out of that zone.
And of course, you try and put defenses in conflict where somebody responsible for that zone might be tempted to take on something else, and then there's another route that comes in behind them. And so that's, as we start learning more about the different areas of the field, watch. Like I loved, again, talking to a few of you last week at Something in the Water, talking about some of the coverages that we addressed last week, and saying we're going to take a look at the game today and see what we can spot, see how many deep defenders we can find, see if you can spot who the flats defenders are when the Argos are in zone. And just to go through some of the other areas, if you're looking short, so we covered sort of like, deep half, deep third, deep middle. But if you go kind of across, like between the flats, you have what's generally called curl and then the hole. So hole is the middle of the field, curl is between the middle of the field and the flats. And these sometimes are called hook curl, sometimes they have different names, but generally those are the areas. If you say flats, curl, hole, people generally are going to know what you're talking about, even if they use different terminology. So thank you for your question, Chris. You have won a six-pack of beer from Something in the Water, so we'll let them know that you're coming down to pick it up, and you can get that from them anytime, maybe Friday night pregame tailgating would be the perfect time for it. All right, let's get into our ticket giveaway, JB. These have been exciting too. We've had a lot of people participating in our ticket giveaway. If you haven't played our ticket giveaway yet, Something in the Water gives away their tickets to home games, and all you have to do is look for our tweet on Twitter, the X's and Argos Twitter account, and if you retweet it, you are automatically entered. And so I am going to put in our random number generator, which Google will do for me here. And we are looking for number 17, which is, I should have done this probably beforehand. That would have been.
It's great. It's great.
The suspense. This is great.
I would say great radio. It's great
yes.
pod.
Yeah. This is Rob and Vicky. This is at Con Ant Leopard. Rob and Vicky, you guys are the winners of a pair of tickets from Something in the Water for this Friday night's game, the Argos and the Montreal Alouettes. So congratulations. We will get in touch and get your particulars for that exchange. All right, JB, let's get into our game preview. This is it, a rematch of the East Final. This is by far the biggest game of the Argos season so far. They played two decent teams. BC, obviously a very good team. Edmonton, a much better team than anyone will tell you, a much better team than their record showed. And now this is a real test because I think this is the team that most people in the CFL feel is the best in the league right now, but it's also a rematch of that East Final. JB, how much do you think goes into the fact that this is the team that knocked the Argos out last year?
I don't think. I think that the Toronto team is significantly different. I think it's going through its own, its own challenges and its own rebranding or recreation. Honestly, I don't feel the electricity of a rematch versus Montreal. It's more, here's a great measuring stick to see where the Argos are, but I just don't feel it. I feel like that game last year was simply Toronto imploding. It was not Montreal winning it. So it feels weird to say that, but it doesn't feel like there's a revenge factor because I just don't think Montreal won it. I really think Toronto just, unfortunately, melted down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Coach Dinwiddie had he didn't go as far into detail as that, but he said, he kind of echoed what you were saying with how this is it's a new batch of guys. A lot of guys that played last year aren't here this year. He doesn't want to put that added pressure on new guys too that have had nothing to do with this rivalry. They're coming in, they're playing, and they don't know anything about it necessarily. That one game at a time, the 1-0 mentality is what he was preaching again this week when he was asked about that. And he doesn't view this as different from any game, but it's a home game and you got to win your home games. And that's going to be the emphasis. Obviously, Toronto's played extremely well at home, now winning 11 in a row at home. And this is as you said, like this is a great test because the winner of this game will be hailed for at least a week as the best team in the CFL by every media outlet. They will be number one in the power ranking, whoever wins this game. And I just can't see, even though I know Saskatchewan's also 3-0, I don't think anyone is going to put them in the same place because their slate of games has been very different. Edmonton, Hamilton. Saskatchewan's played teams that haven't won a game yet collectively. So I think, I'm not saying the Saskatchewan's not a good team. I do think they are, but I just don't think they're going to be in that conversation. It will be the winner of this is ultimately number one going to next week. And so that is pressure in itself. And I think that is, if you can't get hyped up for that, then there's a problem. I think you're in the wrong sport. And so, both teams are going to come fired up for this one. Let's take a look at that injury report. Some concerns, but also a few surprises in here for the injury report. So both tackles showed up today on the injury report, and that was not welcome news, but it is good timing. Obviously, with the signing of Landon Rice, that works out quite well because both tackles practiced full yesterday, no concern. Both popped up as limited today. Isaiah Cage with a shoulder, Dejon Allen with an elbow, and they're both listed as questionable for Friday's game. So we'll have to wait on that and see. Jared Brinkman was back full. That's a great sign. Obviously, he's been one of the best players on the team so far this season. Dejon Brissett is out for this game. He's probably going to be out for a while dealing with a knee injury. Coach Dinwiddie didn't seem very optimistic about him returning anytime soon. Kadeem Carey, who didn't practice full yesterday, was full today. He's dealing with a groin injury, but great to see him go full today. And then Davaris Daniels, that's a surprise because I fully expected Davaris to be out for a long time here. He's not necessarily going to be able to dress. We don't know that yet, but the fact that he's gone full 2 days in a row and is available, he's got that groin injury. JB, would you bring Davaris back, knowing it's a groin injury, knowing it's a receiver? Makai Polk looked really good last week. Do you like? To me, I don't rush Tavares back. I give him one more week. I know it's a big game. I know it's Montreal. It's a long season, and I give Polk one more week in that W spot. I let Tavares get fully healthy, and then I bring him back. How do you handle this one?
Yeah, I mean I think that's a tough call. That kind of injury as well. I think I think you have to trust what you see at practice. And if you see a player going full out at practice, then I think you go. And if you see a player who is hobbled, then you have to step in and do what's right for the player. But I do think if you're at practice and you feel a player is 90% of what they're doing, I think you go. That's the grind of professional football. I think that's the play.
And I just think, conversely, I think you've got this luxury. You won your first two games. You're 2-0. You have a bit of space. You have breathing room. It's a long season. Davaris is too important to this team, and groin injuries are groin and hamstring. Those are killers for receivers, the running backs. They're really tough. And I guess, obviously their medical staff know, their training staff know, the coaches, they're fully aware. But players want to play. Davaris definitely wants to be out there. There's no question. I just think he's so important. You've got that space. And Polk Polk looks great. I thought he had a nice game last week. To me, I give it one more week. But
even as a decoy, I think it's still worth playing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm intrigued by that. I want to see. We'll see what they do, obviously, when depth charts come out. But that's an interesting one to me. And then Darius Joyner was full go, and Jonathan Jones was full go. That is a huge add. He was dealing with that thigh injury, missed last week's game, and I did think that was trouble. As much as I'm high on Muddy Waters and Fraser Sopik, who had looked really good in preseason, I didn't feel like either of those guys were Jonathan Jones, and they, you couldn't really expect them to be. So I think that's huge to get Jonathan Jones back. Hopefully, he's able to dress and that thigh injury is fully recovered. But yeah, that would be a massive check mark for that D that already looks outstanding. So I think that's it for the injury report. We'll have to wait and see how that depth chart works out. But I think the Argos are in a better position than they were a few days ago when we had a lot more concerns. All right, it is time for OCDC. For OCDC, we're going to take a look at the Montreal Alouettes first. I will be the offensive coordinator for Montreal, and then JB will be the defensive coordinator for Montreal, and then we will switch sides and do the same thing again for the Toronto Argonauts. So, offense for Montreal. This is the way I look at it. Montreal's offense, they're playing really well. And this is not to say that they're not. They are getting great opportunities because their defense is so good. Their defense is turning the ball over. The defense is getting them many possessions. They're forcing 2-and-outs. They're getting them great field position too. I think the way that Montreal's defense is playing, Montreal's offense, I don't actually think they are playing as well as it might look like from the outside. I think they still have some trouble there. Obviously, they're throwing the ball all over the yard. Last time the Canadian receivers were showing out. That stuff's great. I don't think that's always going to be there. But one thing I put away against Toronto is I'm not even going to try and run much. I just don't think what Montreal can do in the rushing attack is going to work against Toronto. They have been able to run the ball. I just don't see it there. I see it as a waste of a down for Montreal. So I'm not really trying to do that. I'm going to work the outsides as an extension of the running game. I'll get the ball into running backs' hands through screens. I'll replace that with quick outs, and I don't mind having two backs on the field in that sort of situation too, with a fake handoff and a quick out to the other running back, just to get those sort of token runs. It's not running, but it's almost running. Use that same sort of thing. And I want to put stress on the Toronto corners because I see the trouble they had last week. And so I want to work the outside. I want to work the outside short and force those corners to come up because I know they're going to be, they've got film all week long of getting beat over the top. Benji Franklin especially, there may be some reluctance to come up. And I think those short zones on the outside, I think there's going to be some space there. And so I'm going to also put in those quick hooks. I'm going to put in the quick screens. And I wouldn't mind getting Fajardo on the run as well with an aim to actually run downfield. Fajardo used his legs well last week. Get him rolling out in the pocket with an actual threat to run and run him a few times. Force the corners to make a decision. Are they going to stay with their man? Are they going to come up or force them to stay in coverage for extended periods? So Fajardo on the move, using the outside portions of the field into the flats, of course, but also challenging deep downfield when the opportunities present themselves. That's how I would attack Toronto, and I would not run the ball up the middle at all. JB, what is your Alouettes defensive plan?
Well, I think if you're looking to stop Toronto, although Edmonton, I don't think agreed with my plan.
But they paid for it. They left 39 points.
Well, Toronto didn't listen to my plan either. I believe the key to stopping Toronto is stopping the run. I think that you have to take away the run. I think you have to, even though they have been very successful in the air and have scored touchdowns through the air, I will still take my chances with Dukes. And so I'm looking to bring run heat on every down. I think that they're trying to getting into the guessing game of is it run, is it pass. I'm going to concentrate on taking run. I'm going to play a lot of like man two, and I'm going to give them the 25, 30-yard pass. And if you beat me throwing deep 5 times for touchdowns, then I'll tip my hat. But for me, I'm not going to let them run. I'm simply going to take that away, and I'm going to demand that the Dukes moves up and down the field with me.
All right, let's switch over to Toronto. And I had trouble with this week. Montreal's defense is really good. Watching a couple of their games again and looking at it in detail and sort of saying, what would I attack here? They defend the middle run extremely well, but their defense flies around all over the field. There aren't a ton of weaknesses that have been exposed to this point. That's why they're 3-0, and that's why they've been blowing teams out as well. But I actually think there is an opportunity to attack what they do well. I think Toronto can actually run at the middle. Now, you can't go straight at them. That's not going to work. But I think looking at how well Toronto's fullback, Albert Awashe, played last week, there's something there. And what I want to see is Coach Dinwiddie bring back those wham plays that we saw last year. A wham is a kind of trap block where you trap block the three tech, and either you're using an H-back or a wing back. Basically, you're using a running back who's lined up out wide, and he comes across and he takes one of the defensive tackles out. And that allows your center and your guard to climb up to the next level. And so it's a sort of a tricky way of slowing down that rush from the three tech. And I think they've got the bodies to do that. I'd like to see more carries from Dan Adeboboye in this. I like him as a wham runner and really power run at Montreal. Force their defense to get sucked in to stop that. And then that's going to start opening up stuff off play action. What I'm also going to need in this plan is Dukes is going to have to continue aggressively carrying out his fakes after handing off the ball, continue out on his bootleg to keep Montreal honest. And as soon as they stop respecting Dukes on those boots, then you've got to run it with Dukes. He's going to have to carry the ball, I think, this week. I think you have to have a few designed runs for Dukes. It seems like Dinwiddie's been reluctant to call those plays. There have been what looked like reads, but we've seen it a few times where Dukes, if he had pulled the ball, would have had room to run, but he gave it off every time because I don't think they were true reads. And so I would like to see some reads this week where Dukes actually is running on the ground. And then in terms of passing, design rollouts, change that launch point, make it tough on the Montreal DBs. And I think they're going to really have to work on their site adjustments this week. Montreal blitzes a lot and from all over the place. And so if you've got a blitzing halfback, then the receiver and quarterback have to be on the same page. The site adjustment basically means just the simple version of it is that if a defender is blitzing the space that you occupy as a receiver, you're turning and looking for the ball. You're cutting into that void left by the blitzing defender. And if you've got a quarterback and a receiver that are on the same page there, you can really punish a defense that is blitzing their secondary. So that's something Duke's being a smart QB, he's going to have to find where Montreal is coming from and hit his guy in space. So that is my plan for Toronto's attack this week. What are you doing for Toronto's defense, JB?
Well, I had a similar problem in that, full credit to Montreal. They are a very well balanced team. They have a veteran quarterback. They have an effective running game. They are at the top of almost every category. They have good special teams. They're not explosive, although Ottawa might disagree with that.
They looked explosive against Ottawa, but yeah, that's not their thing typically.
But they're really good. So I think defensively, I don't think I would where I kind of do subscribe to the tie one hand behind their back philosophy, generally speaking. I don't think that's the case here with Montreal. I don't think you can. I think that they demand, because they're so well balanced, I think they demand you play a more conservative game. They don't give up sacks. They don't fumble the ball very much. I mean, I do think they're due for a bit of regression on fumbling. They haven't fumbled yet, so I do think that's something that hopefully Toronto can get done. So, like defensively, I think that what I'm looking to do is I want to double Philpott. I know that they have a real connection. I want to try and take that connection away as much as I can. Not double the whole game, but in obvious passing downs, I want to double that. I want to make sure that that Fajardo is not getting those free yards. Because he is surprisingly good at scrambling, and you have to keep him in the pocket. Look, it's going to be a tough day for the secondary. I think defensive line wise, our line is good enough to be able to control the run game without having to run blitz a lot. Especially if Jones is back at linebacker. So I'm going to put that on the defensive line and linebackers to keep that run game in control. And then from a passing perspective, Montreal loves to go deep. They love the big play. They love that sideline play. I think that you're just going to have to force as much as you can, force Fajardo to make tough throws and hope that he doesn't make them. I don't see any way that there's an aspect of their game that you can just shut down. I think they're too good for that. I think that you want to, that you want to keep deep guys. You want to take away that sideline throw. If you want, give Fajardo that underneath stuff, he'll take it. I think you do have to play more bend, don't break when you're playing Montreal, and hope that you can get field goals instead of touchdowns, and that you're for me, I guess the one focus is preventing the over 30-yard passing play down the sideline. That's what I want to take away. And then the rest is going to be, a challenge. They're a very good team. I wish I had a secret sauce plan. But the really good teams that's why they're good. They don't have an obvious weakness that you can really attack. I think that hopefully one of the big things will be specials. Like I think that they have the number one field position starting. So that's huge. I think the punt return team is going to have to be good at their best. I think that they absolutely are going to have to try and keep Montreal from averaging, double digits in punt return, and therefore, kind of play the field position game and really force Fajardo to to get anxious and to get greedy and to try and take a deep pass when there isn't one there. But I think that from a defensive point of view, I think it's going to be a challenge. I would play a lot of man. I think Fajardo's going to read zone and he will eat it.
Yeah, the D line's got to be able to get pressure without help, right? Like that's going to be one of the keys for if Toronto wins this game. It's because the D line didn't need blitz help because he's torn blitzes apart in the first 3 games. He sees it coming. Zeros especially, they've all turned into big plays. And it's like Vernon Adams that way, where
so like for me, for man, I'm like man under, like man, like with help over the top, not zero.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think if that front 4 can generate pressure, if they can create a turnover, like you're saying, if the special teams can contribute like we expect them to, those are ways that Toronto's going to be able to win this game. But if they don't do those things, I think it's going to be it's going to be tough sledding because Montreal is a very solid football team. All right, JB, my one thing for this week, Albert Awashe. I want him on the field for more than 10 offensive snaps. That is my one thing. I think he has to be a big part of this week's game plan. I think there's an edge there that Montreal doesn't have a great answer for. I don't need him to be out there catching passes. I want him lead blocking. He did a great job against Edmonton. When they ran to his side, and even when they ran away, they were compensating for it, and there were gashes there. One of Adebaboye's big runs was behind Awashe. Carey had a big run behind Awashe as well. He's a great blocker, and he's a weapon out there. And so against Montreal, where you're going to need to still run the football, but it's much tougher than running against Edmonton, I think he's going to have to play a big role. And so I want to see him out there in a bunch of 2 running back packages, either lined up as a tight end or as an H-back, wing back. And hopefully we see Coach Dinwiddie bring back those wham runs as well, because I think that's there too. What is your one thing, JB?
My one thing is the special teams. And as I mentioned, is I want to see the punt return average under 10 yards. I don't think that they will not be easy. But I think that is one area of Montreal's success that you can really focus on and legitimately, feel like you can have an impact there. I think if they can keep the punt return game under control and win the field position game, that will slow Montreal down, because their field position, I mean, they're basically starting on the 45. Like their field position is really, really good. And they clearly are building off that. So that's what I'm looking for.
And a lot of that's their defense too, who are just forcing those 2 and outs, and teams are just constantly punting from their own 15 and 20 yard line. But yeah, you're right. They get those big returns. And so it's going to be all 3 phases. Like everyone's going to have to contribute to turn this into a win for Toronto. So with that said, JB, how does this one end for you? What is your prediction and the final score?
Well, look, I cannot after 2 miracle wins, I cannot go against the Argos at home. I think going to Montreal will be a challenge coming up soon, but I do think Toronto has something at home. I mean, I think when you win that many games in a row at home, it becomes a thing. It becomes a psychological comfort. There's a reason why Edmonton can't win at home. And because it just becomes another thing that you worry about, or you feel like something's going to go wrong. And I think Toronto's the opposite. I think those guys feel like we're going to catch a break. We're going to get a ball bounce off a helmet, or somebody's going to trip, or like something is going to break our way. We just have to be ready for it. And, I think the defensive line and the linebackers, I put my faith in McManus. I think he knows that they are going to have to bring it against this Montreal team, much like they did against BC. So I think Toronto wins it 35-31.
Wow, that is another exciting game. I'm up for your prediction over mine. I think this is tough. I love Toronto at home. They've been fantastic at home. To me, this reminds me of a lot of sports movies where Toronto's just not quite there yet. This is like when they play the sort of big bully rival early in the movie and it doesn't quite go well. They almost get there, but not quite, but they'll be ready later on. I think a lot of guys, whether it's the corners like Franklin and Johnson, any of those new pieces, Polk, guys getting involved, it's just not quite there yet for me. Dukes needs a bit more time still. Everyone needs a bit more time still. This team will be there, but I just don't think they're quite at Montreal's level yet. I think Montreal's playing the best football of anyone in the CFL right now. It's going to be super tight. It may come down to the last second. I think Montreal wins it 28-27 is my prediction. All right, JB, it is time for Put Me Down for 20. We were both slight winners last week. We both went 1-1, but we had plus bets, and so I am now up to 230 golden fleeces from my original 200, and you have climbed back to 195. So yeah, let's have another plus week this week, maybe even better than the few meager golden fleeces we were up last week. So I'll start things off for my Toronto bet. I just think Toronto's going to keep it really tight. 3.5-point underdogs, I think, is a lot of disrespect for how well Toronto's played at home. And while I didn't pick them to win, I do think they're going to be right there. I certainly think they're going to be within a field goal. So I will take Toronto plus 3.5 at minus 110. And that's for 10 golden fleeces. And my other 10 golden fleeces, I'm going to take Calgary on the money line. Again, I think the wrong team's favored. Winnipeg will win at some point, but they haven't yet. How can they be a favorite going into Calgary? Calgary on the money line plus 145. That seems just like a really easy decision for me. And just before I get into your picks, JB, we should remind everybody that you should never take any of our wagers seriously. Certainly don't risk your hard-earned money on anything that we say because we have no idea what we're doing. And so only bet what you are comfortable losing as a price of entertainment. And with that, JB, what are your picks for this week?
Well, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go 10. Again, I also, and we always pick these independently. I also like Calgary at home. I know Winnipeg looked better in that second half, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any rebuilding. I think that teams, when the giant has fallen, are going to try and get some payback. And I think that Calgary sees a Winnipeg team that has been the king of the hill, and they're going to love their shot to try and get shots in. So I like Calgary 3.5 to cover a 3.5 point spread at 215.
So you were setting your own point spread on the Calgary Stampeders. Getting 3 points wasn't enough. You are giving them an extra 3.5 here. So Calgary minus 3.5 plus 215. That is aggressive. I like it. And where are your other 10 golden fleeces going?
My other 10 again, because I've been doing fine. I'm not always about that hedge life. I am going to go with my precious first touchdown scored. They know how to lure me in. They speak my language. I have Duke first touchdown scored. He's the king of the red zone. I haven't come up with a better nickname, but I will. And obviously he could be the Duke of the red zone, but that doesn't seem to work. I'm going to go with Duke's first touchdown plus 900.
That is
my children's children will be living in fleeces.
Yes, the fleeces for everybody. Plus 900 on Dukes with the first touchdown. I came up with the Duke of York as a nickname for Cam Dukes, which everybody seems to like. So I'm going to go with the Duke of York in terms of his nickname for now. But yeah, that is our put me down for 20. And now let's get to our CFL picks. I'm on fire, JB. I've actually won 10 in a row. After dropping the first 2 games of the season, I have correctly picked the last 10 games. Obviously 4-0 this past week. I'm at 10-2. You had a good week too. You rebounded with 3-1 this week, and you are at 6-6. So let's go through our picks for this week. We've got Edmonton at BC. I have honors, so I will take BC. Who do you have in that one? I actually think it's going to be a blowout. Honestly, I think the Lions might win by 20. Edmonton on a short week, having to go Edmonton to Toronto, back to Edmonton, over to BC. That's a ton of travel. McLeod Bethel-Thompson complaining about it this week. He's like, I can't see him not being fined for that, but we'll see. He's right though. He's got a point. Like, you can't have on 5 days a schedule like that is really tough, but you also can't say that without getting fined. And so I expect that's what's going to happen. But yeah, I think after getting so close to Toronto last week, I think there's going to be a little error to the sails there. And I think they're going to have trouble getting going in this one. BC is going to whoop them at BC Place. What do you have?
Yeah, I can't take Edmonton in BC. I agree. I think it is a bad break for Edmonton. That's bad. That's tough scheduling. Disrespectful scheduling, really. And I think BC will be waiting. And I don't like how it looks for Edmonton.
For Montreal at Toronto, you've got Toronto. I've got Montreal for that one. Winnipeg at Calgary. I have Calgary. I assume you're also taking Calgary, or you're doing like a super hedge here?
I hedge, and also this is a competitive arrangement, and sometimes I have to make choices to make up ground. And I will take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to win that game.
This is absurd. There should be a rule against this. You've got your best bet is Calgary minus 3.5. And straight up, you're taking Winnipeg to win.
These are two separate competitions with two separate rules.
You're going to be two separate losers at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And then the last game, we've got Hamilton at Ottawa. Man, what do you do with this game? This was the toughest one for me. I'm taking Ottawa just because they're at home. Not that has traditionally meant a lot, and they looked terrible last week. I think they were embarrassed last week. Hamilton was embarrassed too, but I don't know. It just felt different. Like Ottawa getting their hats handed to them by their closest rival, I thought was maybe something more that you'd like to see them rebound from. So I'm going to take Ottawa here, but I don't have much of an argument. I don't feel great about that pick. What about you?
I am going to take Hamilton. Ottawa, went on my no-fly list in that Montreal game when I tuned in, and they were like, "What? The score is what?" No, not for me, Ottawa. I'm afraid I had you at the bottom of my rankings at the beginning of the year, and that is where you shall stay.
All right, so we've got 3 different picks. The only one we have in common is picking BC to beat Edmonton.
We like to call this moving week in the business.
Yeah, we'll see. I know where you're moving, but we'll let it play out. Well, that will just about do it for us on this pregame walkthrough edition of the X's and Argos podcast. Huge game this week. If you can get down to BMO Field, make sure you do. It's a 7:30 start. It's Friday night football, Montreal at Toronto at BMO Field. The Alouettes favored by 3.5 points, but the Argos have not lost at home. 11 straight wins that you have to go all the way back to find a regular season loss for the Argos to the 2022 season.
And to be honest, the attendance has been a little low key so far. I don't think either of we've had some bad weather and some not ideal positionings, but I think this should be somewhere where Toronto shows out. It's Friday night. It's against the best team in the league. It's not up against any Euro. It's not up against hockey. If there were ever a time for Toronto to get to 17,000 fans, I hope Friday is it.
And sales are already going well. It is already going to be the most attended game of the season. Hopefully that momentum continues.
I think it's going to be a really, really great atmosphere.
For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the